I feel like this is an ongoing saga that I'm creating when it comes to the whole Dave Chappelle situation. And I didn't even mean for it to become a saga until I said, you know what, I'm going to do a part one and a part two. Thinking part two would be the end, but it looks like I will be adding in a part three. And part three is going to be talking about how the people who identify as trans who work over at Netflix are planning to stage a walkout to protest the controversial Chappelle show special, however you want to put it. Now, there was a part in there where I think, well, it was a part out there that I forgot to put something in or slip something in about what was going on uh, involving the trans community. Well, the ones who can't seem to get a grasp on what Dave Chappelle was talking about. And that was them basically, one of them saying, well, not one of them, I think it was, I don't know if it's a rumor or not, that Netflix had let one of them or a couple of them go or something along those lines or whatever the case may be. Now, I'm not sure if that was true or not, but what I am about to talk about is indeed true. They said they plan on doing a walkout. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, okay, do your little walkout. But that's not going to make Netflix back down. And I'm highly doubt that the majority of people that work over at Netflix identify as trans anyway. And those who may support you ain't about to leave that job because your little feelings is hurt over something that shouldn't even hurt feelings. And by the way, I didn't insert this into the last video, but I kind of touched on it because I didn't really know the specifications behind it. But that trans, or that person who identified as trans, who Dave Chappelle supported, I think they were a comedian themselves, who was tweeting about one of his specials, the one that committed suicide. Turns out they were bullied by those in their own community, which thus led to them committing suicide. And if you remember when I talked about it on my live stream, Flame Monroe, when they went on to Donna, Flame mentioned it, and then Don had to cut Flame off because he was like, oh, we don't know if that's true or not. Because see, they don't want to have the mirror of accountability held up in front of their face. Listen, those in that community tend to be some of the biggest bullies on the planet. And one thing that Dave Chappelle has done with the exposure of or the opening of Pandora's boxes, I should say, when it comes to them, is pretty much let them know about themselves and who they truly are. And they keep doing it over and over again because even though they making themselves look bad, hey, it's no press like bad press, right? Bad press is still good press, or however that saying goes. This is one of the few times that in history that I've seen so far in recent history that we see Hall T in particular, because they're the main ones being upset about it, get really backed into a corner. I've never seen this before. Who knows if I'll ever see it again? So I have to give kudos to Dave Chappelle on that aspect because I'm glad that I'm seeing it in my lifetime while I'm still alive and breathing and in good health. So now I'm going to read this article that's coming from the LA Times and see what else they're talking about. Transgender Netflix employees and co-workers will stage a walkout next week protesting the streaming giant's decision to release Dave Chappelle's latest comedy special, multiple Netflix staffers have confirmed to the Los Angeles Times. On October 20th, members of the Netflix employee resource group Trans and their allies will take a day of rest prompted by their concerns about Chappelle's The Closer, which includes several transphobic remarks. And there are none. There aren't any. Them being critiqued is considered transphobic. Notice whenever someone is critiqued, whenever they need to be critiqued, they call it phobic or anti or bashing. They tend to do that a lot, and none more in this instance than Hall T. And what, like I said in my other video, what they hate is the fact that Dave has literally called them out on their BS, where a lot of people were kind of like on the fence about saying stuff about them, but now they have the gumption to actually really call it out for what it is. And thus that means when that happens, they lose their power. And that's one thing that they don't want to do is lose power, even with the little bit of power that they feel that they have right now. It says, I encourage all members of trans and allies not to work for Netflix that day. As we've discussed through Slack, email, text, and everything in between, our leadership has shown us that we do not uphold the values for which we are held. A Netflix employee posted Monday in a public company Slack channel comprising more than 800 staffers representing gender minorities of all sorts and their allies, in a message reviewed by the Times. Between the numerous emails and non-answers that have been given, we have been told explicitly that we somehow cannot understand the nuance of certain content. I don't know about you, but asking for us to show the whole story and not just the pieces that harm trans and other academy people is not an unreasonable ask. The employee's Slack statement continued. Now listen to that. They said, I don't know about you, but asking for us to show the whole story and not just the pieces that harm trans. What did he say that harmed you? Like, I get it. It's mind boggling. He didn't say anything that's harming them. I have not heard of any trans person being attacked since Dave Chappelle's special aired and them coming out and saying, or their attacker coming out and saying, if they caught them, oh, I did it because of what Dave Chappelle said. Not one. I haven't even heard of a person who's in that community who was even attacked since this special aired. Like I said, they're making a mountain out of a molehill. They are doing more reaching than Stretch Armstrong and Reed Richards combined. And they feel like, oh, if we can't get people on board, we're just going to throw these temper tantrums and we're not going to go in. And notice they said we're only not going in for a day. They didn't say they weren't going in for a week. They know they got bills. We just going to take a day of absence. Okay, a whole freaking day. Whoop-de-doo. I wonder if they know how silly they sound. So I encourage all of us to state clearly that we as Netflix employees are stunning, not simply when we are doing the work that our roles demand of us, but also when we challenge the very principles of our company. Another Netflix employee who, like others interviewed for the story, asked not to be named for fear of reprisal, told the Times that the demonstration will follow a virtual event on October 19th that will be open to all staffers and discuss the Chappelle special's impact on the trans community. Netflix did not immediately respond Wednesday to the Times' request for comment. According to another Netflix staffer, the walkout is meant to pressure the streaming giant to acknowledge the harm caused by Chappelle's special. And guess what? When this doesn't work, I'll be back on here to talk about how silly this whole thing was, because I highly doubt it's going to work. Because basically Netflix said, we're not taking Chappelle's special off. If you want to leave, you can leave. Because at the end of the day, Dave Chappelle has brought Netflix millions on top of millions of dollars for the last few years. He's a cash cow. And this was supposed to be Dave Chappelle's last special, hence the name The Closer. This is what he basically fulfilled his contract. But now what the trans community doesn't seem to understand is that with all the attention that they're giving this, Netflix might renew a contract and give him a whole new set of specials to do. Thus, he ain't going nowhere. Even if Dave Chappelle probably wanted to leave, a Pettibone might activate and he said, you know what? I'm going to come back and do some more for y'all. And he won't even have to talk about the trans community anymore. He doesn't even have to mention it. He can talk about anything else. But they'll still be upset. They'll still be mad. Like little kids not getting their way. Imagine that small of a population feel like they got balls of steel. They realize I think they're realizing with this one incident right here, and I don't even want to call it an incident, this one instance, that they know they can't win. They're beating a dead horse. According to another Netflix staffer, the walkout is meant to pressure. Okay, I already read that part. Among many derogatory remarks about the trans community, the comedian said he supported Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, who has been labeled as trans exclusionary, radical feminist, also known as TERF. I was wondering what that phrase stood for, because I never knew. For repeatedly expressing anti-trans sentiments. Organizers of the protests are also demanding, and mind you, hers was simply, listen, you may identify as this person and that person, but at the end of the day, you were still biologically this person and that person. What is anti about that? She was just saying what it is. It doesn't mean that she doesn't care about you or she doesn't like you. She's just telling it what it is. Don't go around calling yourself a real woman when you know damn well that you're not. Because that's the thing. The lines get blurred when it comes to the trans community, especially those who are born men and identify now as a woman. When they say trans women are real women, that's what J.K. Rowling had a problem with. I have a problem with that. Many women, truth be told, have a problem with that. Or if they don't, they should. That's where the issue comes in. And they know that. But they're trying to do that whole Jedi mind trick. That shit don't work on over here. Organizers of the protests are also demanding the Netflix commit to releasing more Academy content on the platform. So you want to bitch and complain to get Dave Chappelle removed, but then replace it with your own. So you can push more of your agenda, is what you're saying, right? Meanwhile, they just made Jonathan Kent, the son of Superman, bisexual. They made Robin bisexual. So what you're telling me is you want to push more agenda stuff onto more streaming platforms, because what the two examples I just gave, in my opinion, those are agenda based. Because I always said, if you want to create people who are in the Academy like as characters, go ahead and create new original characters and do that. Don't harp on the popularity of a character and then just boom, out of the blue, they're in the Academy. What? Okay, fine, they're in the Academy. What does that do for their character? What does that do for the story? Nothing. So you show them kissing. Okay. Just like with that new Eternals movie. They made a heterosexual character. They made him into a gay man. And they harped on, oh my God, they're going to share a kiss. That part almost took me out of wanting to see the movie. But after seeing these previews, I can see that they're not going to harp on that. At least they shouldn't, because that's not what the movie or the Eternals is about. And that's why people say this is an agenda. When you shoehorn that in there in which it does not exist. That's why when it came to the show Black Lightning, a lot of people were upset that the oldest daughter was a lesbian. I said I wasn't, because in the comics, her character actually is a lesbian. So it's not like they just shoehorned in there the storyline of her being in the Academy when she was always in the Academy all along. It says they are not expecting the company to remove the special, especially after Netflix co-chief executive Ted Sarandos announced that the streamer will keep it despite mounting criticism. News of the walkout comes shortly after Netflix suspended 3 employees, allegedly for attending a quarterly business review or QBR meeting that they were not invited to, during which directors and vice presidents at the company discussed the fallout from the Chappelle special. So there it is. So it wasn't a rumor. Allegedly, they said allegedly that they did suspend 3 employees who I guess identify as trans, but they kept talking about, oh, Netflix is being discriminatory because they suspended trans employees because of the Chappelle thing, but they didn't tell the whole story. So the whole thing is they went to a meeting they weren't supposed to be at because they weren't invited. They left that part out. Half-truths, people. Half-truths. One of those staffers, senior software engineer Tara Field, has since been reinstated following a probe into her activities. Netflix has reinstated me after finding that there was no ill intent in my attending the QBR meeting. I'm going to take a few days off to decompress and try to figure out where I'm at. At the very least, I feel vindicated. Field also shared a screenshot of an email documenting the results of the investigation, from which that found that Field genuinely didn't think there was anything wrong with seeking access to this meeting, and that a director at Netflix shared a link to the virtual gathering with Field, which further supported that this was a meeting Field could attend. Before her suspension, Field publicly condemned the closer in a viral Twitter thread listing the names of trans people who were not offended by Chappelle's comments because they died in transphobic attacks before the closer was released. According to the Human Rights Campaign, at least 38 transgender or gender nonconforming people have been killed so far in 2021. Historically, Black and Latinx women have been attacked at higher rates than other trans individuals. See, they pull them little stats out like that to try to add on to that. But again, Dave Chappelle did not say anything that could harm them. And I have to question, and I always say that, how did they get in those predicaments? Granted, I'm not trying to make an excuse of, oh, they're dead and everything like that, but how did they get there? Because a lot of those people who are identified as trans women, a lot of them do stealthing. Remember that story I did about the the black basketball player at George Mason University who went on some kind of an online dating app or whatever to meet somebody, and it turned out to be a whole dude who was trans, and he killed him, like on some crying game shit. They never want to talk about how a lot of the people in that community try to trick straight men into having sex with them, and some are successful. Look at Sydney Starr. That is like the leader of the Decepticons. That person right there ruined Chingy's career right as it was starting to bloom. Excuse me. Promoting trans exclusionary radical feminist ideology, which is what we did by giving it a platform yesterday, directly harms trans people. It is not some neutral act, Phil tweeted last week. This is not an argument with two sides. It is an argument with trans people who want to be alive and people who don't want us to be, Phil added. This all gets brushed off as a offense, though, because if we're just too sensitive, then it is easy to ignore us. That's the thing. You are too sensitive. That's why a lot of people are starting to ignore you. And let's be real here. Dave Chappelle was calling out the racism that goes on in that community, specifically the trans community, since that's the one who wants to make all the noise. Because you're rarely hearing from the L, the G, and the B. It's just the T that you constantly are hearing from. He called out all facets of that community, and they hate it. They just want him to be quiet. Truth hurts. In a Monday statement to the Times, a Netflix spokesperson insisted it is absolutely untrue to say that we have suspended any employees for tweeting about this show. Our employees, exactly, for tweeting about the show. They weren't suspended for that. But they'll have you to believe that that was the case. Again, deception, lies. Our employees are encouraged to disagree openly, and we support their right to do so, the spokesperson said. Around the time Field and her co-workers were suspended, reports surfaced of an internal memo from Sarandos that defended Netflix's long-standing collaboration with Chappelle and refused to scrub the closer from the platform. Several of you have asked where we draw the line on hate. We don't allow titles on Netflix that are designed to incite hate or violence, and we don't believe the closer crosses that line. Sarandos wrote in an excerpt of the memo obtained by The Verge. I recognize, however, that distinguishing between commentary and harm is hard, especially with stand-up comedy, which exists to push boundaries. Some people find the art of stand-up to be mean-spirited, but our members enjoy it. It is important part of our content offering. Well, I am glad that the people over at Netflix, the head people that is, have some sense and have a good head on their shoulders when it comes to the situation. Don't y'all be bullied by the people over at by them individuals. Because see, the people over at Netflix, like the head people, they know that if they was to remove Netflix, if they was to remove the closer from Netflix, they will lose a lot of subscribers. At the end of the day, they're not going to do it for two things. One, because they probably don't believe that what Dave said was wrong or offensive. But number two, and that's the most important, is because they are fearful that they'll lose subscribers. And they know they will. Because you know what? They check these social media accounts. They probably see people say, oh, if Netflix thinks that they're going to remove the closer from Netflix, then I guess I'll be removing my money from Netflix and taking it to another streaming platform. So they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it. And then Netflix probably got a lot of subscribers, a lot of new subscribers, or people who may have not renewed their Netflix subscription and got it and renewed it again to watch this. And because they see that they're supporting Dave Chappelle, that's going to bring them even more people or cause people to actually stay and not leave. So in my opinion, the people in Hall T, y'all are fighting a very interesting uphill battle that I highly doubt you're going to win. And in my opinion, y'all should just quit while you're ahead. Actually, you're kind of behind, but you know, it is what it is. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments.